Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. I will tell you on what's going to be a very busy show for us. I am wearing today, I don't know if we can do this real quick. Can we go to camera one just for a second? I'm wearing today my Sugar Bowl sweatshirt. If you look really closely, depending on what kind of screen you're using and, whatever else, this is black on black, so it's hard to see, but this is a Sugar Bowl sweatshirt right here with the Sugar Bowl logo affixed onto the sweatshirt in black ink. I do not know why our friends at the Sugar Bowl put black ink on a black sweatshirt, but they did. But it looked like I'm just wearing a plain black sweatshirt. But during the show, please know this is a Sugar Bowl sweatshirt in obvious homage to Georgia's return to the Sugar Bowl here this year. So just quick thought there on that. Anyway, we have a very busy and fun show planned for you. It's Terrence Edwards here on a Thursday. There is news around the SEC. Tennessee looks to have made a big defensive coaching hire. Georgia's in-state rival appears to be on the verge, or at least in the mix for a coaching hire that is of note. But when it comes to coaching, there is nothing bigger than what happened at Michigan yesterday. And in a roundabout way, this at least has some tie-in back here to Georgia. So we're going to talk about all of this from the top of the funnel all the way down to how it perhaps impacts us. All of that coming up. And, oh, yeah, by the way, news from end of last week as it relates to Georgia. A little bit juicy, somewhat confusing. We had a real strong response to this yesterday. We'll give you that, too. So it is all on the way. Glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
The most common remark I hear, question I get from people that meet me is, I cannot believe, BA, you do this show every single day. I hear that all the time. And the one thing I always say back to people is, listen, college football is so crazy, Georgia typically speaking, but college football at large is so crazy that most of the time we're just fighting to get all the content in. We do the show every day because there is that much interesting stuff to talk about. In fact, this week's the perfect example of that. You would think, if you were a more casually minded person, that the SEC championship is over, the college football playoff field is set, Georgia doesn't play for a few weeks. You would think ahead of Christmas this would be the downtime. Well, look around, folks. Has it been the downtime this week? I would say no. As I said, we're almost fighting to squeeze the content into the show here right now. And that is before what happened yesterday occurred, which was one of the craziest coaching stories we've seen, on top of what I think is the all-time coaching carousel. You know, I've told many of you this before. I'm a big fan of the drama, the soap opera style theater of coaching carousel of, well, this guy's going to leave this job or this guy's going to get fired, and that's going to set off these dominoes of coaches replacing this guy and rumors about this. I love that sort of thing. And for those of us who do, there I don't believe has ever been a coaching carousel as dramatic, as entertaining as this one, especially since it doesn't really involve Georgia at all. We love all of that. And then yesterday you had maybe one of the biggest of the entire year. I mean, nothing's going to be crazier than the Lane Kiffin stuff, but to have, after all of that finally settles, now all of a sudden the Michigan job comes open. So here's what I want to do for a second. I want to talk about, first of all, the facts as we know them, and then I want to get, broadly speaking, into the big headlines here that kind of relate to Georgia. And then I want to finish with, related to this huge piece of news yesterday, at least one example of how this directly relates to Georgia and why everybody ought to notice what is going on right here. So yesterday it was announced that Michigan was firing, as they say, with cause, Coach Sherrone Moore. You've probably seen the reports. They started as rumors. I guess they've now been confirmed that Moore was having an inappropriate relationship with a Michigan staffer. You know, this led to a mess there in Ann Arbor, so much so that Michigan makes the decision to move on from him. It is true that Moore was apparently arrested yesterday. My understanding is that the arrest was not the reason for the firing. If anything, to say it properly, the arrest and whatever led to that was response to this. That obviously a traumatic situation. To have this happen, Moore, among many decisions that he probably would regret, apparently how he chose to handle this in the aftermath led to his arrest. And I really don't have much more for you on that than that, but I'm sure the internet can be your friend. You can get as many details as you want on this. The point is that Michigan's not only moving on from Sherrone Moore, it is firing him with cause. Moore's been suspended multiple times, dating back to all the issues going back to Jim Harbaugh's tenure. His entire time at Michigan can really be defined as a mess. And I guess to hear Michigan's telling of it, Ward Manuel, who apparently doesn't run his athletic department at Michigan any better than he ran the selection committee last year. But either way, they are now moving on from Sherrone Moore. And here is where you're going to have a bunch of interesting candidates come open for this job. And look, here's one thing you need to understand, and many of you do know this, and I'm going to step outside the boundaries of our normal discussion for a moment. If you care about entertainment news, have you seen the big entertainment news over the course of the last few days that the Hollywood studio Warner Brothers, which makes a lot of the movies that come out every year, the Hollywood studio Warner Brothers, a part of the big corporate conglomerate Warner Discovery, has been for sale. And it looks like Netflix is going to buy Warner Brothers. And like I said, you can go read this on CNBC if you really care about it. But one of the potential suitors for Warner Brothers was like whatever Paramount's calling itself these days. And David Ellison's the CEO of that company. Well, David Ellison's dad is Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison was one of like the major investors in this new corporation that kind of wants to buy Warner Discovery, which, like I said before, is way outside the boundary of what we normally talk about. But the point is that Larry Ellison, who is at least involved in this somewhat, is the second richest man in the world because he founded the computer company called Oracle. Well, guess what? Larry Ellison's wife, and many of you already know this, is a Michigan grad, and she is a very big Michigan football fan. This is not a joke. This is serious. So the second richest man in the world's wife is a big Michigan football fan. So the point is, we talk all the time about, Oregon's got Nike money and all these Texas schools have the mineral rights money. And there's all these, rich benefactors that support these programs. If Michigan wants to play at the highest level, they've got more cash at their disposal, at least potentially, than almost anybody. So the Michigan job coming open is a very big deal. That means even late in the process, you're going to hear some very big names involved in this. A couple of these may be SEC names. For instance, you've heard, fairly substantial rumors about Kalen DeBoer. I take those somewhat seriously for a lot of reasons. I don't know that DeBoer is going to take the Michigan job, but the fact that his name has been rumored to this job, I don't think that's media just connecting dots where there's no substance there. I think this is coming from somewhere. I would take the possibility that DeBoer could leave Alabama. He may not. I take the rumor seriously. I feel differently, though, about, say, Clark Lee. You've heard his name pop up on this. I honestly think Lee wants to be at Vanderbilt. I think he wanted the long-term extension. I think he wanted his donors to step up. And I think for the most part, he's gotten both those things. I really don't think Clark Lee wants to go anywhere. So I don't take Clark Lee seriously for this job. I believe he wants to be at Vandy. Does Kalen DeBoer like the SEC? I don't know. Whether he takes the job or not, I would take seriously the possibility he might consider it. Let me also say one more thing. When you look at what Moore allegedly did to lose his job at Michigan, I do think it makes you appreciate the situation at Georgia. And I'm not going to make this glossier than it needs to be, but one of the things I do think below the surface that you only get tiny bits and pieces of, I do think that Georgia values family. I do. I think the Georgia coaches are family men. And I think that's a really good thing. When Will Muschamp was still in the staff, he was flying up to Chattanooga each week to watch his son play high school football, didn't want to miss those games. Every time you see Kirby, at least one of his children's with him. It's Andrew a lot. He's also very close with his two older children too. Kirby went into the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame with us a few weeks ago. His whole family showed up, as a family for that event. I know, and I've heard tell, I won't have firsthand knowledge of this, but, I've heard this from enough people that, oftentimes like once a week, Kirby, even though the Georgia assistants are burning the candle at both ends, and I'm not going to make it something it's not, they are working very, very hard. And being a hard driving football coach can put a strain on family life. We all understand that. But Kirby lets these guys every now and then go home. If they got to make recruiting calls, make them from home, be with your family. I do have reason to believe that, Kirby Smart, really does value family. I see Georgia coaches with their family walking to church. I mean, like, you see these sorts of things going on. And as I said before, not to make this glossier than it needs to be and more of a fairy tale than it perhaps is, because real life has a lot of real things. But I do think that Georgia values family. And I do think that if you don't, as a football coach, you get yourself in some real trouble. And maybe that is what's going on in this situation with Michigan. And if you're a Georgia fan, as you think about all the things you're thankful for this time of year, the fact that Georgia coaches seem to have a good bit of family stability for the most part. I don't think you should discount the role that plays in the organizational success they're also having. Just something to consider. Maybe you've noticed that too. But all of that said, speaking of Georgia, for a moment here, let's also get more into detail about how this story perhaps impacts Georgia. And this is not one of those things that I'm mad about, and I'm bothered by, but I'm not mad about it because of the specific details. It's just one of those things I just think we need to notice. I think it's good in life to notice things, to pay attention to things. And this is one of those things that even outside the bubble of Dog Nation, I hope people notice, I hope people pay attention to. Because boy, oh boy, the timing of all of this, Sherrone Moore and this news coming out now, man alive, does that not seem to be really convenient for Michigan? That here we are just after signing day, Hayes in the barn for the 2026 class, and lo and behold, golly, I guess we got to fire our coach now. The timing on this seems to be remarkably convenient for a program and an university in Michigan that we're told does everything the right way. This is a school that cares about academics and blah, blah, blah. Boy, this seems to be a very interesting series of events for them coming after signing day. And at least in one way, I would say this impacts a guy that we've talked about on this show before. At one point, a longtime UGA committed wide receiver from a terrific Cartersville program up the north part of the state. Of course, I'm talking about Brady Marchese. Marchese, on the second day of the December signing period, flipped his commitment from Georgia to Michigan. Now, Michigan had long been rumored to be a factor in his recruitment, and frankly, I haven't talked to Brady. I don't know. He may still be very happy with his Michigan signature. Going to Michigan, he may be very happy with that. His family may be very happy with that. And if he is, I'm not mad at him. This isn't so much about Brady Marchese as it is a way of examining what exactly happened here with this Michigan story. We're going to use the lens of Marchese as a way to look at this. First of all, here's what we know, is that the Michigan staff at the 11th hour of this recruitment, after really having not been much of a factor, in recent weeks, apparently got very aggressive at the end because of a couple of other recruiting battles involving guys we don't really care about. I went to some of the Michigan YouTube pages today. There is a website called the Wolverine. They cover Michigan recruiting, and I want to give you about a minute's worth of a clip that their host did upon Michigan flipping Brady Marchese. They were celebrating this as good news. They should have. It is a big deal, was a big deal for Michigan at the time. But I want you to listen to how what we assume is a plugged-in Michigan recruiting reporter talking about the way in which Michigan got Marchese to flip from Georgia to Michigan. This matters here. Big news today. Here's how it impacts Georgia. This is what the Michigan reporter said a few days ago about Brady Marchese.
The staff did a fantastic job, not just putting together an NIL package late, but also just making a concerted effort to win him over. Considering that Marchese didn't visit this fall that we know of, and the fact that they had to pivot so quickly when yesterday was going on with Zion Robinson and his talks with Stanford. And like I said earlier, he just flipped to Stanford earlier in the day. But you also have to keep in mind that Travis Johnson, who did end up signing with Michigan yesterday, he was getting a late push from Virginia Tech. There was a point yesterday where we were so concerned with Travis Johnson that I got up and got in my car and broke my phone and went out to see him at his signing day ceremony. Now, luckily for Michigan, they were able to hang on to Travis Johnson. But while that was going on, they started to have conversations with Marchie. So I think the staff did a great job from, rebuilding those relationships quickly, getting a deal done quickly, and then sealing the deal here on this second day.
So that's the website known as the Wolverine, Michigan Recruiting Reporters. That's their guy on YouTube saying, according to his information, Marchese didn't visit, and he calls him Marchese, but his name is pronounced Marchese, that Brady Marchese didn't visit Michigan this fall. So once Michigan thought we're about to lose a receiver, they did lose one, thought might lose another, all of a sudden now they've got to go back and rebuild this relationship with Brady Marchese. And my question would be, and once again, if Marchese's happy at Michigan, I'm happy for him. I really am. I'm not mad at Brady Marchese, and I don't even have any firsthand knowledge to say that he regrets his decision. I truly don't know that. I just think this is an interesting story. That the Michigan Reporter says, okay, we got to go rebuild our relationship with Brady Marchese because we're about to lose these other guys. Well, what do they say to rebuild that relationship? What all kinds of promises are they making him about what his role at Michigan could be beyond just NIL, which we do believe was pretty significant in this case? But what are the Michigan coaches telling Brady Marchese to get him to flip from Georgia to Michigan after, according to reports from up in Ann Arbor, not taking a visit this fall? I think that's a question that deserves to be answered because here's what we know. While the Michigan coaches are making promises to players like Marchese, and by the way, probably others. We only care about Marchese because he's our guy, but there are other recruits across the country that are hearing all kinds of stuff from Michigan as they try to finish off this signing class. This is what we can pay you. Here's what we think about you. Here's the coaching staff here loves you. All of that is ongoing. Marchese's hearing all kinds of promises. But behind the scenes, did Michigan know that the coaches who were making those promises, including the head coach, that he wasn't going to be there? And if they did, how can that be viewed as anything other than an underhanded tactic? And we have reason to believe today that Michigan did know far more than what it was letting on about what Moore's eventual status was going to be, because all of the stuff that was going on that led Michigan to say, we can't have this. This is below our dignity. Apparently, they knew about that for quite some time. Don't take my word for that. Last night on SportsCenter, a guy you know, Scott Van Pelt, interviewing a reporter that had been very involved in this story, Dan Wetzel. And Van Pelt, in front of the entire ESPN audience, just laid out what I just said, that none of the stuff involving Sherrone Moore was apparently much of a secret. This is SportsCenter from last night.
And I just want to be frank here. I mean, in college football circles, this was not a closely held secret. There was a lot of smoke, a lot of innuendo, but you all aren't in the business of reporting that. So I guess what I'm going to ask as it relates to this dismissal and the investigation is, when was it that Michigan really felt like they might be in the business of needing to find a new head coach?
Well, I think the investigation began, recently. At least this part of the investigation into Sherrone Moore's conduct, and at least over a week ago. And, like they said in their statement, you need credible evidence to make a firing, particularly for a cause of this situation. It's a very sensitive situation for everyone involved. And so that's when it took time. But I agree, there was a lot of rumors, there was a lot of gossip. It wasn't necessarily a closely held secret, but Michigan had their investigation. This is when they came up with in early December.
So can I give you just a quick aside here just for a moment? And I'm not the journalism police. That's somebody else's job. I find conversations like that typically pretty tedious. And this is not a criticism of Dan Wetzel or anybody. It's just a broad statement about how college football media works. This idea, well, these rumors were everywhere, but you're not in the job of reporting rumor and innuendo. I don't know, man. I think there's something to be said for, we treat breaking news when a reporter with a 6-figure follower count tweets out something that 5 minutes later the entire world's going to know. that's useless to the public at large. It really is. Like, we're going to have the SEC schedule release come out later on. I'm sure some of those scheduled dates will get leaked to somebody, and that reporter is going to tweet that stuff out, and he's going to get the pat on the back and the credit. Oh, so-and-so broke the story. But if it's news eventually that everybody's going to have, what's the point? Like, that is, I can tell you as someone who considers himself more part of the public than certainly a journalist, that's useless to the public. That is absolutely worthless to the public. But do you think, whether Brady Marchese regrets his decision or not, if it really was the worst kept secret in the world that Sherrone Moore might get fired, do you think Brady Marchese might would have wanted to know that? Do you think five-star running back Savion Hyder might would have wanted to know that? Do you think the players in the Michigan roster, if they didn't know it, might would have wanted to know this? You know, it's one thing to say, we're not in the business of chasing down every rumor that exists. Okay, that's fine. But if the only news that ever gets reported are authorized leaks, then the public overall is not very well informed. And I said before, this is not like journalism roundtable. I honestly don't care about any of that sort of thing. But when things like this pop up, it does make me at least think about that. Either way, though, Scott Van Pelt and Wetzel didn't deny it. The world seemingly knew that Sherrone Moore was having some trouble. And if everybody knew it and Michigan was trying to keep it a secret so the recruits didn't find out, then honestly, I would say that's, to use a word I used a moment ago, pretty underhanded. And another guy that many of you know, the internet personality Josh Pate, in his video last night in speaking about this, also acknowledged that as far as he's concerned, Michigan deliberately waited post-signing day to make the world aware of what they apparently had known for quite some time. Let me let you hear Josh Pate.
And so then you find out after signing day, which I think was timed purposefully, that he is fired for cause. This is just reading their language, an inappropriate relationship with a staffer. Have every reason to believe that's accurate. And that this is one of those really interesting dynamics where there was a wild rumor circulating behind the scenes and it was accurate. This is what myself, several other people had heard a month ago. So the only question was going to be, do they really pull the trigger on it? Just because you have cause to fire someone doesn't mean you do. So I wasn't privy to the inner workings of Michigan, and I didn't know if they were, but the word was they were going to. Let me put it this way. Agents have expected the Michigan job to be coming open for several weeks now. That's been expected behind the scenes. Therefore, just because they made the move today and it is December 10th does not mean anyone's being caught off guard about this on December 10th. So any names that you throw out there, any speculation, it's not coming as a surprise.
So look, I don't see how you call this anything other than a terrible look for Michigan. Just really, really bad. And listen, Brady Marchese, he may be the happiest guy in the world. And if he is, I'm more than happy to shake his hand and wish him well. I really am. A lot of these folks in the chat are like, let's go get Savion Hyder too. Listen, maybe Savion Hyder's as happy as he can be. Maybe that's the case as well. But it certainly seems like that Michigan kept all of this a secret from recruits and the public at large until they figured out, A, are we going to beat Ohio State and make the college football playoff? B, can we get our signing class signed? Because let's face it, if they make the playoff, which if they beat Ohio State, they very well could have done, do we hear about any of this? Maybe not. So let me finish this up this way because we've gone long. For a long time, those of us down here in the SEC footprint have been told by people like Michigan, haughty, self-important, very proud, we would call them arrogant, about how we're all a bunch of rednecks down here. We'll do anything to win. We'll cheat to win. We even hear this openly talked about right now with the advent of NIL and things like that of, now it's legal. And basically what they will say is up north, they're now doing the things the folks in the South have been doing all along, as if the South, allegedly, I'm not willing to stipulate anything, but allegedly was the only one who was ever doing the improper benefit or something along those lines, that a distinguished, august body like Michigan would never be involved in something so underhanded as that. Have you seen what's been going on at Michigan the last couple of years? Whether it be Connor Stallions and the sign stealing and all the ways in which Michigan tried to cover that up, everything else related to NCAA stuff, going back to the Jim Harbaugh time, it has been one scandal after another, which would lead me, hopefully the folks at Georgia, everybody else around the SEC, to say this. I don't ever want to hear a word again from Michigan and how high-minded their principals are and how they care about academics and they're about doing this the right way. And down here in the SEC, we're just a bunch of rednecks that want to cheat. Once Michigan had one tiny taste of maybe we could be good at football, they became willing to do whatever it took to be good at football, including enduring the embarrassment they're going through right now. I don't want to hear another word from them on anything ever again. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Meriwether and Tharp. We are glad you are with us. However you get to us, live on video, 10 a.m., radio, Athens Sports Radio 960, podcast, wherever you find them as well, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. And we're very happy today to be brought to you by our friends at Meriwether and Tharp. And because I am such a well-trained broadcaster, because I am classier, frankly, than the folks in Michigan, I want you to watch me do this read for Meriwether and Tharp, our longtime sponsor. And at no point in time during this sponsor read am I going to make a cheap, tawdry joke about Sherrone Moore, which, frankly, takes a lot of self-control from someone like me. It's low-hanging fruit. We're better than that. So when I talk about Meriwether and Tharp being your source for Georgia divorce, at no point in time will I be asking if Meriwether and Tharp perhaps has an office up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, or if they have plans to open one. I won't be making any of those jokes here because, frankly, I am, unlike Michigan, I'm just simply better than that. So I will tell you this, though. Even though I'm having fun with you right there, part of the reason why I don't joke about this is because if you're going through a divorce, or if you fear that you might, if that's already on your mind for 2026, it's nothing to joke about. And I do. I mean that sincerely. We know how heavy that topic can be for those of you who've either been through it before or concerned that you might go through it. And I can tell you, while our good friend Bob Tharp and everybody else from Meriwether and Tharp, we love them. They're great people. The fact is while they may have a good time talking college football and enjoying Georgia football, when it comes to dealing with you in a divorce situation, they're going to roll up their sleeves in a very serious way, get to work for you on that. So if you've got questions about the divorce process, they've got answers. And one of the questions you may have is, hey, how much is this going to cost me? Cost certainty is one of those issues that comes up a lot with Meriwether and Tharp in all divorce situations. And Meriwether and Tharp has listened to these concerns, and they've really shaped a level of coverage that I think is really beneficial to you. An array, kind of a menu of options in terms of what makes sense for you. I would say the most popular option they're offering right now is what they call their model M&T level of service, which is a really creative way to get what you need, a satisfactory resolution to this complicated situation in a way that gives you some idea of, okay, how much is this going to cost? They're able to answer that question for you and any other divorce questions you might have. So I want you to set up that initial consultation, tell them your story. Sometimes it's nice just to be able to tell people what's going on with you, especially when it's experts on the other side that can instruct you and guide you on what maybe you should do next. So online, it's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right. We got Terrence Edwards coming up in a moment. A lot to get into with Terrence. That's going to be a lot of fun. Prior to that, though, let's go around the doghouse. And, of course, it's presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. And speaking of more stuff that we can fit into the show, there was news last week, at the very end of the week, as it relates to a legal action that Georgia has taken against one of its former players, Damon Wilson, who went to Missouri. I guess the telling of this goes is that Georgia had an agreement in place with Wilson, had begun to pay him on that, but after that document had been signed, Wilson then made the decision to move on to Missouri, and based on the clause in the agreement that Georgia had with Wilson, there was a payback, a buyout required from this. According to Georgia's telling of this, Wilson and his camp didn't hold up their end on that, and Georgia wants the payment it feels like it's due. This is going to be a little bit controversial for people who like getting the weeds in these college football, legal issues. The payback clause here, if you want to call it a buyout, is not punitive towards Wilson so much as it is, recompensing Georgia for its, basically, loss when it feels like it's got a player signed to a contract. It misses out on its chance to go get other players with that same money. I think that's going to be the Georgia side on this, although I am not a lawyer. But, in the court of public opinion, one of the things that's going to come up is, oh, this is Georgia essentially suing one of its former players. And so given that's the way this is going to be described to some people, I had a chance yesterday to ask one of Georgia's former players, did he have a problem with this? This is what Davin Bellamy said about how Georgia is, at least based on a report at ESPN, currently handling its former edge rusher, Damon Wilson. This is what Davin said.
Sue him, and take him to court. These guys are playing a professional game now. This is not 4-5 years ago, where you playing for, $71.50 and a Pell Grant, in January. You guys are making top dollars, right? And when I signed that contract, no matter where I am, a 6-figure deal, or like if you do not honor that contract, you are a professional player now. You are able to be taken to court. When you start bringing in money and we start talking about these $1 million, contracts for 20-year-olds, well, money is the root, of all evil. These guys aren't mentally stable enough sometimes to have, all this money. So now you get guys trying to get greedy. Let me sign this deal and still go to Mizzou. It doesn't work like that. You are a professional player now, and you have to, go by the contract.
So that's Davin Bellamy on that. However, Davin was not done, going into more detail, as he says, of, hey, you're a pro now. If you're going to get paid like a pro, you're going to be asked to honor the terms of your contract like a pro, and you better know all of those various facets. Bellamy, who himself has been a professional athlete, went into more detail on that.
Even though David Wilson was a player for us, he is no longer a player for us. He bled and he sweat, with us. But this group that's on the, field now are the Georgia Bulldogs. You decided to take a dollar amount to go to Mizzou. And what I was told is you were given a contract that you have been happy with, but you wanted more. You wanted greed. That's why you went to Mizzou. You wanted more. You wanted greed. That's why you allegedly took money from Georgia and then went to Mizzou. Now, what I do hope these guys do is when I first get that lump sum of money, I don't go blow it yet. I hope he didn't give 4%, to the agent. And I hope he didn't go buy a car. And I hope he didn't go buy a house, because 9 times out of 10, he's going to have to pay that 6 figures back. Yeah. And we hope he still got it. But this is what you're going to see. I hope Georgia wins this so the rest of the league, can continue to do this. But when you start bringing in money, $1 million, young guys, they start to get greedy. And that starts to, put a mirror on being a good person when you start bringing, all this money in. So Georgia needs to take him to court if, allegedly, what happened, happened. So I'm with Georgia on this one.
Listen, man, Davin lays it on the line right there, and I do think he's right that a lot of other programs will be looking in on this. Not because everybody hates Damon Wilson or anything like that, but I think if you want college football to have some stability, I do think how you handle your contracts gives you a chance to do that. If you feel like you've got a guy signed and then he just bolts off and goes somewhere else, well, obviously, that has the risk of being completely unstable for the entire sport overall. And people say, well, coaches do that too. But coaches always follow the letter of the contract when they do that. The buyouts, things like that, that's if-then language. In this particular case, the buyout was in place, but the buyout was not then paid back. So, that's the difference between this and what coaches typically do. But let me just do one thing real quick before we move on. Whatever happens to Damon Wilson here in court, it is really interesting to think that Georgia thought it was going to have Wilson, then it didn't, and had to essentially rebuild its defense after missing out on a former 5-star edge rusher that they probably thought was going to be one of their centerpiece players. So when you hear Georgia talking about some of the stuff it's been talking about since Saturday, the improvement on that side of the ball that it's shown all year long, I think the additional context for that is it had to go back to the drawing board once it, to its own surprise, found out it was losing Damon Wilson. So let me play you a clip that I've played for you before. But now when Kirby talks about defensive dominance in an SEC championship game, keep in mind, this is a option B version of a Georgia defense that maybe at the beginning of the year thought it was going to have Damon Wilson, and then it didn't. I think it puts the Georgia defensive emergence on even more impressive footing. Let's hear Kirby Smart one more time, just on some context on that.
Oh, it was a huge difference. It was it was a domination on that side of the ball, and a lot of it came with a chip on their shoulder from the last one, and it came on a chip on their shoulder from improving. We told them after that game that there wasn't a lack of execution in that game at home. They outplayed us, they out-executed us, they probably outcoached us. And we weren't going to let that happen again in terms of the way we played with his guy. They're getting better. Young kids are growing up. There's a lot of naysayers out there for Schumann and his staff, and they never flinched. They kept getting better, kept growing the players, and they played really well tonight.
Yeah, when you think about Schumann, the job he did, if you thought you're going to have Damon Wilson, then you didn't. The fact that Quintavious Johnson and Gabe Harris and all these guys have grown up as much as they have, truly that is a credit to the Georgia defensive coaches who made that a possibility. And we'll find out what happens next with this legal battle between Wilson's camp and the University of Georgia. That's also around the doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. Great time for you to go enjoy a wonderful beach vacation. Daytona Beach, a great place to do it. 23 miles of shoreline, international airport, you can fly right there. Outdoor activities, wonderful time in the winter. You deserve a beach getaway. I think it's a great Christmas gift to give to somebody. And if you want to find out more about that, check out DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals. That is DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that today. We love having Daytona Beach as a part of Around the Doghouse. Okay, before we're done, there's actually even more coaching news in the SEC, and in one respect, a pretty big piece of news. We'll give that to you. But for now, on everything with Georgia, preparations for the Sugar Bowl, still looking back on an SEC championship win and so much more. Let's talk to Terrence Edwards here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Terrence Edwards. Always glad to have him as a part of the program. And Terrence, we'll get on to the stuff that's obviously happening with Georgia ahead of the college football playoff. But let me go back to you on the big news of the day. Sherrone Moore fired by Michigan post-signing day. If I'm a guy like Brady Marchese, and I apologize for not remembering if Brady's a guy you've worked with or not. You've worked with so many of these Georgia wide receivers. I apologize for not remembering if Brady's one of your guys. But whether he is or he isn't, listen, if I'm Marchese's parents, if I'm Brady myself, if Moore's getting fired, boy, that's information I'd like to have. And maybe I make the same decision. And if Brady wants to be at Michigan, that's his prerogative. Honestly, this to me is more about the larger story than just one recruit in particular. But because we've gotten to know Brady, because he was a longtime Georgia commit, it's easy for me to see this through his eyes that Michigan finds out, okay, well, we're not going to beat Ohio State. We're not going to make the playoff. Let's get our signing class in place. And now we will release the information that, according to Scott Van Pelt and Josh Payton and all these other guys, apparently the entire world already knew. Boy, that's a tough look for Michigan. And I frankly do feel sorry for these recruits, whether it's Savion Hyder or Brady Marchese or anybody else, that may not have had the full picture before they made the decision they made.
Yes. Brady's not one of mine. He's a guy that was developed by another trainer here in Atlanta, good friend of mine, Rob Master, Quay. So give a shout out to him for developing that young man. And for his recruitment, I definitely would like, as a parent, to know this information before signing day. And I was just thinking about it, like, I don't know, allegedly, I believe that they knew this was going to happen before signing day. And if this news would have got out before signing day, I don't think these kids would have signed or delayed their signing if this news was out before signing day. So I believe they knew already that this was going to happen and just waited till after signing day.
Yeah, I mean, people think that it's all about the money these days, and I don't dispute that NIL is a huge part of this. And listen, if Brady went up there for a big payday, I'm glad for him. I really am happy for him. I don't have any ill will towards him at all. But Terrence, you know this because of all the players you work with. While guys want to get paid, you know, it's also one of those things of you want to feel comfortable where you are, and the coaches that you work with is one of the main sources of comfort that a player has. And if all of that's going to become completely different, you know, after you've essentially put pen to paper, boy, once again, for a Michigan program that acts like it just invented, you know, academia to behave this way, I mean, I hope they rightly get called out for what I really feel like is some pretty underhanded tactics on their part.
Yes, and for a kid that's from Georgia, who's probably not used to being away from home, So his comfortability with the coach that brought him there is going to be gone. Also, the weather aspect to it is, I played in Canada for a long time, and I understand how cold it gets with the snow, and that could be an adjustment period for a kid that's from the South. So, there's questions that as an athlete and an athlete's parent, I will be asking right now. And I don't know about Brady or anyone else, but I'm pretty sure there's probably going to be some football players that have been asked out of their letter of intent, and rightfully so. And they probably still could go to Michigan depending on what coach they bring in. But it's going to be a lot of questions asked before any of these signees sticks with Michigan.
Such a good point, too. Quality of life of any issue related to, I'm not sure about my coach, or I'm getting a little homesick. All of that made worse when it's -5 degrees day after day after day. And up there in Michigan in the wintertime, it gets pretty cold. Speaking of -3, that's how many rushing yards Alabama had against Georgia. Terrence, I thought it was such a thorough domination for UGA in the SEC championship against an opponent that fans have wanted to see Georgia get that kind of win against for quite some time. What did you make of the Georgia performance in the SEC championship game?
We always have spoken about each week about fast starts, and there's some weeks where I spoke on the defense like they need to start fast as well and get off the field. And I think the numbers game from the third down conversions in the first game were just, they probably went their first 9 or 10 third downs, and defense got off the field and the defense got after. And so as a coach, the one thing that you want to see is your team continuously get better each week. And you've watched this team, they've just got better and better and better, and they're peaking at the right time. And I'd rather Georgia peak at the right time than plateau and stay the same. My old high school coach, Rick Tomlin, always tell us, get better or get worse, don't stay the same. So this team has gotten better each week, and this bye week, we could get some of the guys healthy. And I think we are peaking at the right time, and I can't wait to see whoever it is. If it's Ole Miss or Tulane, I can't wait to see us in New Orleans.
I think that's exactly right. And give me a little bit more of a thought, if you don't mind, of how does Georgia use this time? Part of it is about resting and recuperating. You got to try to get guys healthier. Plus, there's also just that. I mean, think about how many hits Gunnar Stockton has taken. Over the course of the last few weeks. There's something about just recharging your batteries after the grind you've been through. How can Georgia best use this time right now to make sure it is ready for that college ball playoff when it comes up?
I don't know how Kirby has handled this in the past, but just as a player, just having it maybe a day or two off, just to recharge, just to reset, just to get your mind off of football just for a short period of time, may be the way. I don't know if that's how he's done it in the past, or it just continues like, let's keep our foot on the pedal. But the coaches know their team, and they know the pulse of their team. So, I hope that they was given maybe a day off just to relax and take a deep breath, because that's what's such a I ain't gonna say stressful game, but I say stressful for the fans, because we've been there, done that with Alabama, and we finally beat them down. That was a real domination of a game. But then at Kirby said, it's right back to work. He's going to split the staff up to get all the data that they need on both teams. Ole Miss is a team that we've played, but they were different 5-6 weeks ago. Trinidad Chambers is playing well. Lacey, the running back, is playing well. So it's about trying to recharge and get ready. And I guess when they play Friday, we'll figure out who we're going to play, and let's get to work.
Let me talk to you about a couple of wide receiver related topics for a moment. The shocking news for me post SEC championship, pre-Sugar Bowl, is the fact that at some point in this playoff, Kirby leaves the door open that Colby Young could return. Now, listen, Colby's a tough guy. Nobody disputes that. But given the injury that he sustained at the time, I thought his Georgia career had come to an end. I think we were mostly treating it as if that's what it was. I mean, how big of a deal would it be for Georgia to get this red zone weapon, this contested catch guy, third down guy? How big of a deal would it be for Georgia to get Colby Young back?
That would be a big deal. I mean, for someone who we all thought was done for the rest of the year, and he was looking like, our best receiver. So imagine having what Branch could do in the intermediate passing game, and have Colby Young be able to stretch the field along with Dylan Bell. So getting a player back like that, along with the way Noah Thomas has been playing lately, that's just more weapons for Gunner and the Georgia Bulldogs to go out and just try to figure out ways to get them guys the ball. But that'd be a huge upgrade if Kobe Young is able to come back and perform up to his ability and standards that we set for him.
Zachariah Branch got a touchdown in the SEC championship. I just think putting another, line underneath his Georgia career to this point in time. You talk about a guy who's come in and just, felt like a Georgia guy the entire time, positive contributor to the overall team culture, really good player on the field, dynamic. Georgia has to have that guy that got a little wiggle to him, and clearly that's what Branch has. How impressed, and hopefully there's still many more moments to come this year, but how impressed have you been with what Zachariah Branch has brought to UGA this season?
Very impressed. He's in 1 year, already number 2 in the record books for most reception in the season. I think he's 4 away from breaking Bryce Hunter's all-time single-season receptions mark. So that's been an incredible thing to do. He's a guy that you get the ball in his hands very quickly, and he will do the rest. That's why, everyone has a big fascination with the screen game. Like, he's a guy that you want to get the ball to as quick as possible because he will make things happen. And we throw so many screens to him. How many times have the fake screens have been open, been big plays for us? So he's been a godsend. You just think about what we were last year as a receiving group, lead the nation. We led the nation in drop passes, and I haven't heard not one complaint about drop passes this year. So that group has really came out and played the way that they should play, and haven't had a word about the drops. Even Dylan was here last year. He hasn't had the drops, and so I just think James Cole and that whole craft and whole staff and Mike Bobo have done a great job of putting these receivers in position to be successful.
We talked about Talon Taylor last week, and he did come back and play on Saturday. And Terrence, he almost got a touchdown. He was open. Ball just got deflected, I guess, or whatever. But he got open. That would have been such a cool moment of retribution. And listen, maybe he gets one of these in the playoffs. But I know how sick he was about that drop, and I know had he not gotten injured, he was going to come out there and show people why Georgia wanted to throw it to him against Alabama the first time. But to think that he almost got that touchdown would have been a really cool story. But that's another really valuable weapon that Georgia could, add into the mix of the playoffs that opposing defenses are going to have to account for.
Talon is going to be a star. I've watched the young man up close. I have an opportunity to work with him personally. So I'm excited for, him and CJ. And their future is very bright. Those 2 young men that could be an X and a Z, and Jacoby White in the slot and whoever we get. I'm excited about that room and the talent we have in that room. Even if Kobe Young decides to leave, Noah Thomas decides to leave, Zachariah Branch decides to leave, I love Jacoby. I love Talon, and I love CJ stepping right into that in that mix. And we still have do-it-all Landon Humphreys. Like, we have a group that we can sustain excellence for the next 3 or 4 years.
No, I think that's right. And then another receiver who, listen, under different circumstances, his moment could have come at that position. He's battled a little bit of injury, and obviously he's just competitive for playing time. But as somebody who knows what it's like, to be in the sport and to put your life on the line at practice every single day, for a guy like Cole Speer to get the moment that he got blocking a kick, I know for your SEC championship 2002, Ja'Cory Bryant, block kick obviously set the tone for that game. It's really reminiscent for me with Cole Speer doing that on Saturday. How happy were you for a guy like that to get celebrated and to really have now a moment attached to him that's going to live on in Georgia lore? Retribution for the Tyler Simmons things a little bit too. How much fun was that for you to see with Cole Speer?
Yes, I was on a weekly podcast with some former Dogs, Corey Allen, Thad Parker, Javaris Johnson, Eric Robinson, and I brought Cole Speer's name up for 2 reasons. For one, in this day and age of guys transferring because they are not getting the playing time that they feel like they deserve, Cole Speer is a damn good dog. He bleeds red and black. He didn't take the opportunity to, I'm not playing and transfer. He's going to graduate. If I'm not mistake, he's already graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I mean, he had the biggest play, one of the biggest plays in the SEC championship game. And he could go down and tell his kids and grandkids that about this play in the SEC championship game that led to Georgia winning and maybe a deep playoff run. So I'm so happy for that young man. I watched him in high school, actually coached against him when I was at Pace Academy.
Okay.
Coming from Calhoun, we know how football is in Calhoun, Georgia, and I just appreciate the young man because he stuck with it and he just bleeds red and black, and he is a damn good dog.
Yeah, I'll let you go after this, but I want to echo that same point. And I think people generally know this, but it's worth saying that and I did see him, if you saw Cole play for Calhoun, as you say, very talented program, won state championship last year, not going to this year, but they won state championship a year ago. This is a big-time program in Georgia. Cole Spear at Calhoun, he's not coming off the field. He's a physical safety. He's a playmaking wide receiver that if you're on the Georgia roster, you likely dominated in high school. And Cole was a dominant player at Calhoun, but, all 100 guys at Georgia, all 105 or 85 scholarship or however you want to, quantify it, they were pretty much all dominant players in high school. So a guy like this if he gets one lucky break along the way, somewhere like that, hey, maybe he's doing some of the things at wide receiver that other guys are doing. I think he would have been perhaps capable of that. It worked out for him a slightly different way, and yet he didn't sulk, didn't pout. He just apparently became a dominant special teams player, as we've been told, and showed the world that, to me, that's the beautiful thing about football, is when a guy sticks with it, gets his degree, he's going to go on to great life. He'll be able to tell that story at these, like rubber chicken type things for as long as he wants to do that. I mean, I just think that's a great story.
I do too. I just think in this day and age, I'm pretty sure he had opportunities to transfer maybe to a smaller school to go and get more playing time as a receiver. But he wanted to finish his career out as a Georgia Bulldog, and I could commend him. And anyone who decides to leave, I don't fault them for following their dreams, but I also want to shed light on the guys that do stick it out and do stay and do believe there's a bigger message in his football career. I don't know what he's going to do after his football career is over. Maybe he go and be a great coach, but he will have all these stories and memories to tell his kids, the kids that he's coaching, if that's the route that he takes. But that's just a memory that can never be taken away from him. And I'm so proud of him and happy for him for that moment.
Terrence, I love talking to you about Georgia football. We got some fun conversations in the weeks to come as Georgia, we hope, makes a big, long run in the college football playoff. It certainly seems like a real possibility. Thank you for being with us here today. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Can't wait to talk to you soon. And by the way, for people who are getting ready for that bubble work, it's coming. If you want to be the next Cole Spear or the next C.J. Wiley or the next whomever, how can folks connect with you in the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy?
Yes, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, great stuff. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So can I brag on us just for a minute? And listen, this is incredibly self-serving. I will be more than happy to tell you that's the case. But it is amazing to me. So we're talking about Cole Spear. Now, first of all, you got to understand something. On this show, much to the chagrin of the people who help us put it together, we have very little pre-show planning. I really don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. And so therefore, we got like 5 words written down on a sheet of paper, and that's pretty much the guide for everything that we do. So, there's no pre-planning that we're going to go to a Cole Spear topic today. It just popped up in the moment. And yet when we did, we had, this is, by the way, somebody, and it's by somebody, it's Cody Chaffins. Somebody had to put this video together far before Cole Spear ever became the SEC championship hero. We've got all this video of a helmetless Cole Spear running routes and pregame warm-ups. It's like a real show. Like every now and then we do something, I'm like, man, this is like a real show. We are doing like real show stuff. We're talking about a Georgia player, a little bit down the roster just a bit, with all due respect. And boom, we got just miles and miles of videotape of that. It's not actually tape anymore, but you get my point. Miles and miles of videotape of that guy while we're talking about it. In the moment I'm talking to Terrence, like, this is like a real segment. This is like a real thing. I don't know. It's one of those things that makes me very happy when we're able to do that. So good stuff there. Just wanted to make mention of that. Kind of a fun thing to keep in mind. That said, let's get ready to do our SEC through here right now. And We mentioned the big coaching news as it relates to Sherrone Moore and what could be reverberations in the SEC on that. I take the Kalen DeBoer stuff relatively seriously. The Clark Lee stuff, probably not quite so much. But there is more coaching news in the SEC that we need to get to. And this is unofficial, but it has been heavily reported, oftentimes a precursor to the eventual announcement. It sounds like Jim Knowles, who won the national championship as defensive coordinator at Ohio State, and this was a big deal last offseason. People forget that right up until Penn State completely collapsed and fell apart, Penn State was like a wheeling, dealing, big-time program. Last offseason, heavyweight news, Penn State money-whipped Ohio State for its national championship defensive coordinator, stealing Jim Knowles away from the Buckeyes at the time. No one could have known that the guy that made that shrewd move, James Franklin, wouldn't even be employed a few months later. This is just, the Big Ten cannot come close to matching the SEC from on-field talent, fan passion. But when it comes to soap opera drama, they're not bad. You got to credit where credit's due. They don't have the same players. They don't have the quality of fans. Clearly, they don't have, Southern culture, obviously what we're most proud of. They don't have any of that. But soap opera drama, complete and total chaotic nonsense, much like the SEC's been famous for, the Big Ten's not doing bad in that category. So the point is Penn State steals Jim Knowles away from Ohio State. Then James Franklin gets fired. Now it certainly seems, and this is a step up from some of the early names we probably heard from Tennessee. It seems like Tennessee could be in a place to hire Jim Knowles. Nobody that's listening to the sound of my voice right now likes Tennessee. But we're not liars. If Tennessee were to bring in Jim Knowles, that would probably be a pretty big-time coaching hire. I would say it's not guaranteed to be a Grand Slam home run, just simply because the one big question that's always going to exist with like a Josh Heupel offense, Alex Golich going to deal with the same thing at Auburn, different offensive system, but Lane Kiffin deals with some of this too, which is how good of a defense can you have when your offense wants to play this way, especially with these pace and space teams like what Tennessee, Goalish, and some of these guys want to do. When you're out there running 100 miles an hour, and Tennessee, from a pace standpoint, probably played faster this year than they ever have. Certainly faster this year than they did a year ago. When you're playing that fast, how much of a problem do you create for your defense? Or if Jim Knowles gets what he wants, how much is that going to slow down the Tennessee offense? Because when Kirby Smart talks about complementary football, offense helping the defense, that really isn't just coach speak and Kirby leaning into his pet topics. There really is something to be said for if you go as fast as maybe you'd like to on offense, your defense is going to feel the effect of that. It just is. And so how a Jim Knowles defense marries itself to a Josh Heupel offense is probably worth paying attention to here. And I'd also say this, once again, we're not Tennessee fans, but in a spirit of honesty, people were asking the question of after Tennessee had gone 8-4 this year, hot seat for Josh Heupel. Is Josh Heupel in trouble? Now, to be fair, maybe Jim Knowles doesn't make the best decisions on this kind of thing because he just went to work for a coach that got fired. But I'd like to believe that Tennessee is not making, and they haven't made the hire yet, but they're expected to, not making a hire like Jim Knowles, if that does indeed go down, if they didn't believe that Josh Heupel was their guy at head coach. In other words, I love coaching rumors. I love hot seat talk. We are here for all of it. But we called this what it was to begin with. That Josh Heupel was not, nor should he have been, in trouble at Tennessee. I think this is proof of that. Shifting gears outside the SEC for a moment, but meaningful to Georgia, there is big news coming out of Georgia Tech today, where on the heels of losing Buster Faulkner to Florida, and by the way, we could see rumors as it relates to Faulkner here coming up. We may not be done with rumors involving him this offseason, so buckle up for that. That could be fun. But as a potential replacement for Faulkner at Georgia Tech, it seems very serious that Chip Kelly, who left Ohio State to go be the coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders, they're a total disaster, that Kelly could be in the mix for Georgia Tech. Now, once again, being honest, given Chip Kelly's coaching pedigree, if Tech were to make this hire, this would be, at least for the on-field impact, a pretty big-time hire. When Key signed his contract extension the other day, it came with what these things always seem to have now, which is the additional promise of, as described, resources. That Tech, for as long as most of us can remember, has been under-resourced. They haven't had, in this age, NIL to pay players. They haven't had the kind of assistant money pool to keep quality assistants in place. Tech has just not swam in the deep end of the pool. In re-signing Brent Key, it's also a signal that Tech at least wants to punch above its current weight class, or maintain the weight class that it's found itself in, try to be maybe an upper third program in the ACC or along those lines, and then boom, just like that, you lose Buster Faulkner. But if you were to replace Faulkner with Kelly on the field, it would at least be a signal that Tech hopes to have some staying power. It's a top 25 team right now. It would like to remain that. I don't think their ceiling is much higher than top 25, but they would like to believe themselves of frequent appearances in the top 25, and a coaching hire like this would signal a seriousness about doing that. And yeah, because we're brave truth tellers wherever the truth leads us, it's also worth pointing out that almost everybody likes Buster Faulkner. Buster Faulkner is an additive figure to your program culture. And I think that Tech, with Brent Key, has been trying to build a community and a culture within the program that people feel good about, that they like being around, attractive to transfers and, things like that. To be frank, that is not how Chip Kelly is thought of. You talk to people who have worked with Kelly, and I have, they'll tell you he's a pretty weird guy. And the way in which people really, I think, like Buster Faulkner, like being around him, like working with him, I have not always heard that about Chip Kelly. And Chip Kelly left a head coaching job in the Power Four at UCLA because he didn't like modern college football, we're led to believe. So, given the fact that, Faulkner, I think, played a very big role at Tech, does this slightly weird, kind of aloof, not so happy about what college ball's become, is that a good personality fit for what Georgia Tech wants to be? I don't know about that. I don't know about that. It's a big-time, bold-print hire if Tech were to make it. Tech fans will follow themselves to be proud of it. But Buster Faulkner, who we're big fans of, I think brought a lot more to Tech than just his on-field prowess. Oh, yeah, so now speaking about being a real show, we're doing Chip Kelly stuff, and we got video from Kelly at the national championship game. Yo, I don't know if they have Emmys for podcasts, and not because of my performance. We could come close to winning one today. We're just dropping in B-roll left and right. Here is fresh video that we shot ourselves. And look who oh my gosh, what a moment. If you're listening podcast or radio, I apologize. Although we're long since out of the radio hour. But how about the fact that Chip Kelly right here doing a little handshake with Brent Key? Y'all, this is the stuff that awards are. I think there is a podcast category in the Golden Globes this year. This is an award eligible segment. We're talking about Chip Kelly going to Tech, which like 99% of Georgia fans don't even really care about. But while doing so, we're giving fresh video that we ourselves shot of Kelly talking to Brent Key. This is truly an amazing thing. I mean, this is one of the proudest moments for me on this show, even though it's not even a given that Kelly will take the Georgia Tech job, and most Georgia fans don't care if he does. But how about this video, folks? And this is totally unplanned, as if everything else is around here there as well. We're just doing all this stuff on the fly. Now, I'm going to shift gears to a different topic for a moment. And by the way, if we got video for this, then we have really dug pretty deep. There is a new, and look, this is not official yet. I think our headline's going to say that it is not official yet, but it looks like Kentucky has targeted a new defensive coordinator. Their old guy, Brad White, I'm guessing we don't have any Brad White video around. Brad White, who had worked with Stoops, leaves to go to Florida. So the brand new coach who comes over from Oregon, looking to make a move with a defensive coordinator, and it sounds like it's going to be Jay Bateman. Jay Bateman, who had been defensive coordinator with Mike Elko. So I think you probably see the writing on the wall on this. If you're a guy working with a guy like Elko, the question you're always going to be dealing with is, well, if your head coach is a respected defensive mind like Elko, is it really your defense? That's why a guy like Bateman might be willing to make what some people think was kind of a downward move to go to Kentucky. You might wonder about that. It's also interesting for A&M that as they move towards the playoff, losing DC to Kentucky potentially, it is official. They lost their offensive coordinator to Kansas State. Colin Klein is the new head coach there. So we've had a lot of coaching changeover when it comes to these college football playoff teams. For instance, A&M not the only program to playoff to lose both coordinators. We got a lot of head coaches leaving. That's been interesting. So there is reporting that Jay Bateman could be going to Kentucky. We take that pretty seriously. A&M's already lost offensive coordinator. It's also probably an example is you bring in the sharp, young offensive mind over from Oregon to now be head coach in Kentucky. Well, we don't really know how successful that's going to be because all these coaches are a little bit of crapshoots. Kentucky, frankly, one of the very few Power 4 programs right now willing to hire Will Stein, by the way, the new head coach's name. I knew if I talked long enough, that name would pop back in my head. So there you go. Will Stein, the new Kentucky head coach. We don't know how successful he's going to be. Kentucky, one of the few Power 4 programs, though, willing to promote a coordinator from somewhere else to be head coach. I do think, though, fresh energy, innovative offense, young, vibrant, and bringing in a guy like Bateman from Texas A&M is probably more positive vibes the Kentucky football program's had in quite some time. It's also at least somewhat interesting to note that maybe, not all that long ago, we thought that A&M was going to steal Kentucky's head coach, and now you've got a different head coach stealing A&M's defensive coordinator, at least potentially to Kentucky. Worth paying attention to that. One more thing to give you here real quick. Tonight, we already know the opponents for Georgia for the 2026 season and all the other SEC teams too. Tonight, though, it is the official SEC schedule release. In other words, the dates of the games, the order in which they'll be played. If I could give you one thing to watch for from a Georgia perspective on this, it would be in the the new expanded SEC era that includes Texas and Oklahoma. To this point, Georgia has not yet played back-to-back road games. In both the last 2 years, it has played back-to-back games away from home. It played in 2024, Florida and Jacksonville, Ole Miss on the road the following week. And this year it played Florida and Jacksonville, Mississippi State on the road the following week. So Georgia has had 2 straight games from home. I don't think that has the same impact as back-to-back road games do. In fact, I think either Texas A&M or Arkansas won. I think they may have played I think somebody, maybe in Oklahoma, somebody did the 3 straight games away from home with a neutral site game in the mix there. It may have been Oklahoma. So we've even seen that before, but a lot of teams in the SEC do get stuck playing back-to-back road games. Georgia, through the first 2 years of this expanded SEC, has not played the back-to-back road games. We will find out tonight if they get that. Anytime you see the dates of the game in its own way, that's always pretty interesting. But for me personally, in terms of what I think could have an impact on Georgia, especially with some of these trips being a little longer now, is Georgia stuck doing a back-to-back road game situation? I would be paying attention to that. They have not done that yet, but that does come out tonight, so that'll be big news here tomorrow. I told you, we may be in between conference championship weekend and the college football playoff. The news ain't slowing down, folks. It is not slowing down, not anytime soon. And we try to be here for you. And when we do, we'll have pretty B-roll to match with it because that's how professional we are. We'll make that your SEC through. So this week we've been asking a provocative question in the spirit of the great Georgia fans of years past who once said, "What time is it in Texas?" We're asking the question, what's the temperature in Tuscaloosa? And I got to tell you, people are having a very good time with this right now. Let's give some golden shoes with that in mind, starting with this.
Even at 3 below, the tide rolls on. That's one tough elephant. Bundled in crimson, breathing clouds of steam, standing proud in the cold.
That's Josh Bird sharing this. So using AI to get the voiceover there. Also, the elephant freezing out there. Josh writes in on X, I heard it was chilly in Bama today, somewhere around -3. Very good from Josh. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. Very clever usage of the AI, the voiceover included. We got another golden shoe going out for a similar thing here. Johnny Hendricks writes in to say that Ty Simpson's got a brand new helmet, and it's the Alabama Crimson and Cream with the -3 on the side. That's really funny from Johnny. Y'all have done such a good job with this. I do think, what's the temperature in Tuscaloosa? I think that's got a little staying power here. Love that from Johnny, Josh, and everybody else who's sending these in. We'll continue to give those as part of our golden shoes. Lousy, stinking Gators. We also had some fun with them yesterday as it relates to their newfound status as the Tulane of the SEC. About 1,860 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. Thank you for being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We hope you'll come back and see us again tomorrow. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can check them out for that and trust them for that. They always take good care of us. So, Cody, I'm assuming we just have video for every Georgia player. And that's not to denigrate Cole Spear. We love Cole Spear. But we have video for every player?
Yeah, I sit there and shoot the entire warm up. So try and get everybody. Like yesterday, Rayshawn Dinkins, we did a topic on him, and I'm like, how much video do I have of Rayshawn Dinkins? So how much did I? So I kind of had to go through. We get an hour pregame where the guys come out in t-shirts and they do some warm ups, and then they come out in uniform. So I try and shoot all that. What we do, and the hard thing about Dinkins was we hadn't reached an off season yet, so I hadn't been able to catch up. But the offseason, Kamal and Danny, who help us out, kind of go through the roster and say, here's everything we have of this guy. Everything we have. And there are some guys. When Parker Jones had his incident last year, I did not have Parker Jones, I will admit. But, there's a lot of guys that we are able to get. So we just kind of store it away, never knowing when that moment might come.
And so when you have the Chip Kelly video today, of him talking to Brent Key. So when I tell you, hey, we probably need to mention this Chip Kelly thing, how quickly in your mind do you go? Because I think that people that aspire to be in the media, this is interesting for them, and probably only just them, but nonetheless, when I mention to you, hey, there's a rumor that Kelly may go to Tech, how quickly does it pop in your head of, oh gosh, I've got video of Chip Kelly talking to Brent Key? Is that something that you remembered immediately? How quickly did your mind go back there on that?
You were in the segment, and I was like, you know what? When I was at the national championship game last year, I thought it was very interesting that those two guys were talking. I had totally forgotten about it. So you're in there in the middle of the thing talking, and we were able to kind of recall it. Part of that process is I have to go through all the video I shoot, and I archive shot by shot of what I got. And so then it's searchable, and that's what makes all of that possible. So it just, you were in the middle of it, and I was like, so Treston is directing today. I said, Treston, hold on. I've got this video. So we were able to call it up. And that, again, it was actually unedited. It was just like a raw clip. So that's why it took a second for Brent Key to show up. So
I was very happy. So I think that's a lot of fun. And if you watch on video, those are some of the extra little treats you get a chance to see. I mean, the video that we've put on the screen in recent years has been fantastic. By the way, I'll also restate something I said earlier, that it seems like I'm wearing just a plain black sweatshirt, which obviously, I don't typically do. If you'll look closer, and I don't know why our friends in the Sugar Bowl did this. Their hospitality is typically outstanding, so I have nothing bad to say about them. But this is the Sugar Bowl logo on a black sweatshirt. It's black on black. Now, why they did that, I don't know. But this is the Sugar Bowl logo in a black on black type situation. So that's what that is. You can see this right here. That's what that is, black on black there. So that's what's going on there on that. Just to make sure everybody's aware, I am supporting the Sugar Bowl today, although it probably does not quite read quite the same way. So there you go. But you can kind of see it right there.
One more note.
Please.
Texas last year, so did not play a home game in the month of October. Went to Florida, had the game in Dallas, Red River, then went to Kentucky, went to Starkville before getting back to Austin.
Okay, so that's really interesting. And then, this year they went a long stretch before they played an SEC home game too. So that's what their schedule has kind of been. So we have not seen Georgia play the back-to-back road games, and I do think that probably matters. And they're going to do it eventually. They're obviously going to, and I'm sure they'll stick to Georgia with the two longest road trips they can give them. But we have not really seen that yet. That's a good note on Texas. I have not really seen that yet from Georgia. So if you want to know the one thing I'm watching for tonight, what are the is there a back-to-back road game here? Let me also, the truth is I probably remember the Georgia opponents for 2026 a little less than you might think. So let's look at these road games here for a moment. You've got at Bama, that's a short trip. at Ole Miss, at South Carolina, at Arkansas. So the worst back-to-back you could have would be at Ole Miss, which is sneakily much farther away than you realize. A lot of Georgia trips are closer than you think. Starkville's not that far away. Kentucky's not nearly as far away as you might think. I mean, it's not 2 hours away, but it's not 10 hours away either. Kentucky feels a long way to me. I think of Kentucky as the North. To give you an idea of how Southern I am, I think of Kentucky as the North. But driving-wise, once you're north of Knoxville, you're basically there. It's not that far away. I would say, on the opposite of that, Oxford is farther away than you think. Oxford's basically Memphis. So it's farther away than you think. So if Georgia thank you, this is a very nice graphic. If Georgia got stuck doing Ole Miss, Arkansas back-to-back in any order, that's 2 pretty long road trips. But Tuscaloosa, I mean, it's a tough game. We'll see who the Alabama coach is, but it's a tough game. But Columbia and Tuscaloosa are both short trips, so you don't really necessarily hate that. You wouldn't want to play either of them back-to-back, but you don't hate it. Arkansas, Ole Miss would be 2 very long trips. In fact, if I had any gumption about me at all, if I had any, a younger version of me would have just dove in and done this. Now that I'm fat and happy, will I do this? I don't know. It would be very interesting to look to see how teams that did play back-to-back road games, how they performed in those games, including the first home game after a series of back-to-backs. I'm guessing you might find some interesting information on that. And if any of you want to do the research, I will very gladly promote your product for having done so. I don't want to dig through the schedules and find that out. But for the teams that have played back-to-back, how have they performed in those back-to-backs, and what has it been like for them coming back home again after the back-to-back? There may be something to be asked about that. Let us see what else. Mudcat says, too bad we don't get LSU next year instead of Ole Miss. Sounds like Mudcat wants to play Lane Kiffin. Jeremy Harbin says, this will be 4 years in a row we've played Ole Miss. That's nuts. Here's the thing, though, Jeremy. I'm pretty sure you're a good bit younger than me. I think you are. For those of us who have a little gray in our hair, when I was a kid, Georgia played Ole Miss every single year. In an era when the SEC only had, this doesn't matter. I'm just telling you that there is a generational divide on this. That when I was a kid, Georgia only played a 6-game SEC schedule, but one of those 6 opponents was Ole Miss every year. I'm talking about way before I was born. Georgia probably played Ole Miss 50 years in a row or something like that. Georgia almost never played Tennessee. When I was a child, for the first probably 3 or 4 years of my fandom, Georgia didn't play Tennessee. I had heard the story of beating him in 1980, not old enough to remember that. But my first game for Georgia against Tennessee came in 88. It was a season opening game. And then, shortly after that, the division started. Now they played them every year. But, we think of like Georgia, Tennessee as being rivals. When I was a kid, Georgia did not play Tennessee every year, but it did play Ole Miss every year. So, once again, this could not matter less. But in this thing where Georgia's playing Ole Miss every single year over the course of the last 4 years, this is just like what my childhood was. But as Foster Moss points out, you also have this thing, there's going to be one SEC West team that you just go forever without saying. And prior to Georgia playing them at home in 2023, Georgia had not seen Ole Miss since 2016. That is true. I don't dispute that. That is true. John Hendricks says that Tennessee is definitely a bigger rival than Ole Miss. Yeah, the point is not that Ole Miss is a rival. The point is that Ole Miss was a yearly opponent, even though Georgia didn't play. In the era of the 80s, when I was a child, their yearly opponents would have been Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, and I guess one would be rotating. Does that sound right? They always played Vandy, always played Kentucky, always played Ole Miss, always played the 2 rivals, and then one was a rotating game with the other SEC teams. Does that sound right? I feel like that's what it was. Maybe I've got that slightly wrong, but I feel like that's what it was. Also, when I was a child, Georgia played South Carolina every year, but South Carolina was not in the SEC, but it was still a yearly opponent. None of you care about any of this old-timey stuff, but it's just what it was. Aaron Brown says, get on the bandwagon now and hit that like button. Hey, listen, for those of you who help us promote that, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you. Let's see what else. Alan Harper says, does money buy head coaching job? Smart goes to Michigan. Let me tell you something. First of all, Kirby's not going anywhere, but he ain't going to go live up north for $1 billion. Larry Ellison could give him all of his money. If there is anybody who's more of a Southerner than I am in terms of like deeply entrenched, as he likes to call it, the SEC footprint, Kirby says SEC footprint a lot. Kirby may be more Southern than me when it comes to his affinity for down here. Larry Ellison could give him Oracle, and he ain't going up north, I don't believe. Dennis Wilson says in 1988, Ray Goff was taking L's to the chin. Shows what you know, Dennis. Among many things that you've been wrong about, in 1988, we were enjoying the final season of Vince Dooley, 201 wins, the Georgia coach. Stayed at Georgia for 25 years as head coach. A transient place like Miami wouldn't understand that kind of staying power, but that's what we enjoy with Vince Dooley. It's great. Let's see what else. Let me go to DawgNation.com for a minute. By the way, I got to go here in a minute too. I think the Michigan story is fun. Because it gives me a chance to, give back some of the haughty. Like, there are a lot of things we do just for fun, but I do have a deeply held belief that I don't like some of these Big Ten places. I don't like them. And I mean, I really don't like them. I know that's not classy, but it's just how God made me. So getting a chance to give them back some of the, haughty self-importance that's defined them for such a long time feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. Matt Rukavina at DawgNation.com says he enjoys me reading Dennis's comments. Dennis is a pretty good sport. Bill Camacho says he thinks that every SEC team should have back-to-back road games. I know 4 SEC teams play in neutral site games: Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia. Yeah, I mean, my belief, Bill, is every SEC team should have back-to-back road games except for Georgia. That's my also a closely held belief, that I'm in favor of SEC teams playing back-to-back road games other than Georgia. I'd like to see Georgia not do that. Randy Hall says, please set the record straight. Did we sign the punter Wade Register? That's a very good question. Here's my assumption. I assume that Wade Register is going to be a part of the Georgia roster, whether he is on scholarship or whether there's some other agreement in place. I do not know. Georgia has always kept that close to the vest. In fact, over the course of even pre-NIL age, there were probably guys at Georgia paying for their own school that you didn't know about. There was a time a couple of years ago when I just gave up on because you had the thing where you could have a little bit of a sliding scale with your with who you signed, above a 25 number. But the 85 roster limit, that was a hard cap. There was a hard cap on 85. You couldn't have more than 85 scholarship players. But for several years, it seemed like Georgia had more than 85 scholarship players. Clearly, they couldn't have. They didn't. So somewhere along the way, I just gave up. It was one of those things of, this is an interesting topic. People want to know how Georgia's maximizing its roster potential. It's part of the reason that Georgia's been as good as it is. But Georgia's not telling, and, industrious minds will try to figure this out on their own. But eventually it was just basically unknowable. So will Register be at Georgia? I don't have any reason to think he won't be. Is he on scholarship, or is he paying for his own school, or is some benefactor paying for his school or whatever else. Perhaps that's the case. Is like, what is it, blue shirting? Is that still a thing where you kind of get next year's class? Does it even matter anymore? That is a great question. So so Randy, here's the most substantive answer that I can give you, is that whatever may be going on with Mr. Register has probably been going on for a while, just not always that well publicized, that there are ways to maximize your roster by getting creative with how you pay for certain schools or certain people's schooling, and perhaps that's what Mr. Register is also doing. So Jamie Scott says that Jeff and Kaylee did say he's going to be a preferred walk-on with his money coming from the NIL package they are going to do for him. So there you go. Pretty much what we assume might be true. Jeff and Kaylee reporting that apparently last night. A Low Country Dog was walking through the airport in Stockholm, said he did not get a Go Dogs. I am disappointed in hearing that. We'll call that Stockholm syndrome. Did not get one of those out of the Stockholm airport. I am disappointed in that. But gosh, Stockholm at Christmas must be gorgeous. That must be gorgeous. Little Scandinavian Christmas decorations, snow in the background. That sounds amazing to me. Senior Dog 54 says, I thought they were doing away with preferred walk-ons with the 105 scholarship limit. Yeah, I really don't know. I really don't know. I've never been great with small details. I mean, obviously, some of that is going away. Perhaps not all of it, but some of that is going away. But the one thing that Kirby Smart has said is that even with a so-called 105 scholarship limit, most teams will not have 105 scholarship players. Look, the NCAA, one of the things that it sometimes does is it does something over here to divert something over there. For instance, during the COVID, do you remember this? The NCAA is like, hey, for all the guys and gals who lost a year of eligibility because of COVID and our embarrassing handling of that situation, although they didn't say that but should have, we're going to give you an extra year of eligibility. We're going to be magnanimous and generous and give that to you. Here's what they did not say, that there was no additional funding on the part of the member institutions to pay for those extra players. So if you're at a group of 5 school or a lower level Power 4 school or something like that, the players may have extra eligibility, but the schools didn't have any way to pay for it. And so it's the NCAA getting to say, look how generous we are. Hey, everybody come in here, look how good we are. But the schools did not have any extra money to pay for it. And a lot of these schools below the level of like the SEC just don't have any money. A similar thing with the 105 scholarship thing. The SEC, or should not the SEC, college sports in general are doing away with roster spots. So as a way of making that story sound a little better, they're saying, okay, we may be reducing the number of players on rosters, but we're increasing the number of available scholarships. So it sounds like there's a trade-off. There is no trade-off. Most schools cannot pay for 105 scholarships. They just can't. Even relatively, prosperous Power 4 schools, they either can't or don't want to pay for 105 scholarships. Now, Georgia could pay for 9,000 scholarships, but it could be that there's just a better way to do all of this, and that may be what Georgia's doing. And if your school is getting paid for, then, or if you're playing on the team, then you probably don't even really care. But that might be what the story is. So I know I slightly sidestepped that, but I think I gave hopefully an answer. Rambo says, can you do partial scholarships in football? No, I believe that partial scholarships have always been banned. No partial scholarships in football, I believe. Frogger 2000, noticing the voice is better. It is better. It is not completely better, but it is far improved from where it was. And the reason why I say it's not completely better is because in my mind, I'm always obviously wondering, I wonder if this thing could get completely better at some point. But I appreciate you noticing that. Kayla Meyer says, everyone is a center, but I hate how Michigan stands on this false moral high ground as the quote-unquote Michigan men. I do too. It's sanctimonious, and it's just grotesque. And how they have behaved. Because remember, I mentioned COVID a moment ago. One of these days, somebody, now they never will, but one of these days, somebody needs to go back and do, whether it's like a 30 for 30 or just a oral history, or there ought to be some story told of how the Big Ten behaved during COVID. Because back then, they thought they were like, beneath, football was beneath them. They were like, they thought they were the Ivy League and they weren't into football. Now that, they've seen some chance at success, all of a sudden now they're willing to do anything to win at football. Michigan has forever tarnished its reputation just to get a slight morsel of a taste of football success. But a few years ago, Michigan was leading the way that in no uncertain terms, there could be no season, and that you were a Neanderthal if you even considered the possibility of playing college football in 2020, that the Big Ten under no circumstances would play this season. When the SEC said, hey, y'all have fun with that, and we're going to have a season, well, now the Big Ten completely about-faced and changed its mind. But boy, and listen, I remember, I can tell you line by line official reporting of some of the stuff they did as a way of justifying their decision to cancel the season. It was eye-opening. All of it done with the mindset of we're so much better than these rednecks down south. One of these days that story should be told, but I wouldn't hold my breath that it ever does. Let me change the subject. So Low Country says, no snow, just rain, but the whole country is like a Christmas village. However, nothing is as beautiful as Athens on game day. Low Country, I love that. That's awesome. That's obviously a reference back to Sweden a moment ago. For whatever reason, after having lived, 40 whatever years of not really being this, in like the last year or so, for whatever reason, this has never been true before, I've become really interested in Europe. I think that's probably a sign that I'm just, getting older or whatever. I've just become really interested. I've never been to Europe, never really had much of a desire to go to Europe. I like to go to the beach. If I travel, I'm going to the beach, going to sit on, the Caribbean somewhere, something like that. Y'all know what I like to do. Never been all that interested in Europe, but for whatever reason, lately I've been very interested in Europe. So for those of you who take those kinds of travels, by the way, little addendum on a topic from earlier. Frank says that UGA did not play Ole Miss every year in the 50s and early 60s. And early 60s would have been the best teams for Ole Miss. He said that started in 66 on a consistent basis. So there you go. 80s Dog says, speaking of the 80s, Cole Spear of that block punt secured his future in the business world in Georgia. Smart not to transfer for playing time. No, absolutely. Yeah, he can tell that story for the rest of his life. I would imagine that he will have a chance to make a lot of money off of that particular moment. You got to think. Frogger 2000, I am not going to read that comment. Let us see what else here. So UJ Marine says that Division II, Division III can do partial scholarships, but it's not allowed at the Division I level. Let's also get some Facebook comments. And by the way, I don't think that the average person necessarily realizes just how complicated like the baseball scholarship situation is. Poor baseball, man. Like, the people who know it, love it. The ballparks are great. The atmosphere is intense, but man, these baseball players have it rough. Compared to the typical college athlete, baseball players are second-class citizens. I think that's really sad. Brian Whitaker checking out. Brian, we appreciate you being here. Brene, I believe it's pronounced. Brene Blackburn says, Italy is gorgeous, a lot of history. Yeah, I'm interested in that. I've been watching a lot of movies lately that take place in Europe, and Italy is one of the ones I'm really interested in. Now, I've also told you this before, being, who I am a very picky eater. I've told you that. We talked about that yesterday. I'm a very picky eater, or one of these days this week we talked about that. So even like a place like Italy that's known for its cuisine, some of like the northern Tuscan, Italian food, that might be a little over my head from a palate standpoint. But I've just gotten very interested in Europe, England in particular, British stuff in particular. I've become a little bit of a Europhile lately. Let's see what else. The problem with Facebook now is it just doesn't, it used to be you could scroll back all the way to the beginning on Facebook, but you can't quite do that now. By the way, talk about the Braves in here. Braves do make a move, bringing in Yastrzemski. Outfield depth, obviously still pretty big hole at the shortstop position. I agree with y'all on that. I think that's probably true. Matthew Dills says, as if it needed to be verified, take a look at by the way, Jacob Alexander says, we know, BA, when it comes to not scrolling back through Facebook comments. Sorry about that. Matthew Dills says, as if it needed to be verified, take a look at the coaching carousel of 2025 and appreciate having the best coach in the business. Yeah, the fact that Georgia is so just hard at work, knocking out, preparation for a game, getting better over the course of a season, it really is. Y'all, we try to soak up every moment. We try to enjoy as much of it as we can. But you almost can't enjoy it enough. I mean, it really is something. It really is. Bill Sanders says the BA eats like a 7-year-old. He wants chicken nuggets at every meal. Close to that. I eat a lot of fried chicken. I'm not going to deny that. A lot of red meat, a lot of fried chicken, a lot of steak and potato type stuff. Oh, Jacob was talking about being a picky eater more so than me not properly seeing the Facebook comments. Yeah, I'm a picky eater. I really am. And, I always say this on the road. I try not to make it a problem for everybody else. There was one time where we stopped. I'm not going to mention any proper nouns here, places we may have stopped, but I stopped, got a breakfast, inedible, so bad. And I threw a tantrum in the car. Oh my gosh, I threw a tantrum. And we had to stop the next exit to get me a different breakfast. That was the one time that I really went high maintenance. Normally, I think, and Cody can attest to this, for a road trip, a weekend road trip, going to a road game, something like that, I give myself one big high maintenance request, one big ask of, can we do this and not that? But I try to limit it to just the one. Rambo says
self-awareness is an important part of it all, and we appreciate it.
I do try to maintain a certain sense of self-awareness that whatever high maintenance stuff I have going on, picky peculiarities, I try to make them my problem and not somebody else's. That really is true. Rambo says, can you imagine how big the football roster would be with like partial scholarships? Yeah, no doubt. And I guess, if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, part of the reason, they'll tell you this, the only reason, but, some of this stuff gets lost to history. Part of the reason that Georgia Tech left the ACC was related to a limit on signing classes. This is back in the 1960s. Is that right? 1960s. Obviously one of the worst decisions any program's ever made. Tech's made some bad decisions, but that may clearly be the worst. But the reporting from the time will tell you, and you can go back and read this, there's a lot of it out there, that it was a limit on signing classes that caused Tech to want to leave the SEC. Probably short-sighted. I think even Tech people will admit it was a short-sighted decision. But, I mean, I want to say back then you could sign 40 in a given year or something like that. And but it was something related to, I don't know, how big your roster could be compared to how many guys you could sign. And, I think that Tech had some concerns about that. So the point is, back in the Bear Bryant days, the Bobby Dodd days, I mean, I think you did have just these armadas, these rosters that were essentially the size of a battalion, didn't you? Jacob Alexander says, I wonder if BA would eat frog legs. No, BA would not do that. Now, on the cruises, they do have the escargot. And it's weird. So, I eat like a child, but my actual child, my son, is a lot more adventurous than I am. It's really funny how, sometimes, obviously, children are just like their parents, same genes. In some cases, they're a little bit different. My daughter's probably a little bit more along the lines of me. My son, though, we go on a cruise, he'll eat the escargot, or at least try it, wants to say he tried it. Shared a table with escargot, not with frog legs. Have not done that, nor would I plan to. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming, very, very sophisticated, says that she loves escargot. So there you go. What else? Frank says, like you, I was never interested in traveling to Europe, but in 1998, my wife's company sent her to their home office in the Netherlands and Germany. Loved it so much, we've been 12 times since. I think you should give it a go, especially if you like history, like World War II history is everywhere. Yeah, I'd love to see all that. I really would. It's also just interesting to think about how much older, I'm not about by thousands of years, how much older Europe is than America. You know, America is just a very young country. We're about to celebrate our 250th birthday. We're a very young country, whereas like, you know, you go back to like what, when the, you know, Vandals sack Rome, and then, you know, you have, you know, the fall of the Roman Empire, and then what you got, what the Vikings are conquering everything. Like that's European history dating back like thousands of years. It's just crazy how much longer and older European history is compared to American history. And listen, I'm not, you know, a historian, but it's fascinating. It's fascinating just how much older Europe is than America. Jim Blair checking in from Colquitt County. Looking forward to the 5A semifinals tonight. On TV, you got Gainesville Rome, you got Thomas County Central Roswell, and then after that, the final state championship game will be set with state championship play next week across all classifications at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Okay, we got to go. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that, including getting your heating system, keeping you cozy and comfortable all winter long. Tune back up to factory fresh specs. RS Andrews can show you how. So find them online at rsandrews.com. Okay, y'all have a great day. We will see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Thanks for being here. Hope you'll come back again tomorrow.